The air inside the burial chamber was thick. Centuries of stillness pressed against the skin like a second atmosphere. Flickering torchlight revealed walls painted with ochre, gold, and lapis blue, the colors of eternity. And there, lying in ornate wooden sarcophagi, were the preserved remains of 3 pharaohs who once ruled the mightiest kingdom on earth. For millennia, their faces had been hidden, their voices silenced. But in recent years, a sliver of science has pierced the darkness of their tombs. DNA, pulled from their mummified bodies, whispering truths that challenge the way history has been told. The results were undeniable. These pharaohs, kings whose names still echo through temples and monuments, were of unmistakable Black African heritage. Yet outside the laboratories, you won't see these results on museum placards. You won't find them in glossy tourist brochures. In fact, the institutions holding their remains seem eager to make sure you never hear this story at all. To understand why, we must first return to the river that birthed them. The Nile, ancient, unbroken, eternal, flows north from the heart of Africa, carrying with it the lifeblood of entire civilizations. Before the pyramids rose against the desert sky, before hieroglyphs recorded the glory of kings, this land was shaped by cultures rooted deep in the African continent. The earliest dynasties of Egypt, especially in the Old Kingdom and during the 25th dynasty, bore rulers whose lineage came from Nubia, the region now split between southern Egypt and northern Sudan. These were the Kushites, warriors, builders, and keepers of an unshakable belief that their rule was sanctioned by the gods. Names like Pi, Taharka, and Shabaka carved their place into history between 747 and 656 BCE, uniting the Nile Valley under their reign. They expanded temples, restored monuments, and revived ancient traditions that had begun to fade. Their likenesses, preserved in statues and reliefs, show unmistakably African features: broad noses, full lips, and tightly curled hair. And yet, for more than a century, mainstream depictions of Egypt have leaned toward Eurocentric imagery. Golden-skinned pharaohs with narrow noses, as if the sands themselves had bleached the truth from stone. It was in the late 20th and early 21st centuries that a quiet revolution began. Advances in genetic testing made it possible to extract and sequence DNA from ancient remains, even those thousands of years old. In one such study, scientists took samples from 3 mummified pharaohs, carefully drilling into bone and teeth to retrieve fragments of genetic material. The work was painstaking, each step performed under conditions designed to prevent contamination. When the results emerged, they painted a portrait that archaeology had long suggested, but politics had often ignored. These pharaohs, kings whose names still echo through temples and monuments, were of unmistakable Black African heritage. Museums, especially in Europe and North America, have long curated Egypt in a way that divorces it from its African identity. Visitors see golden death masks, intricately painted coffins, and towering statues, but rarely are they told of the pharaoh's deep African roots. This selective storytelling has a history of its own. During the height of colonialism, European scholars framed Egypt as an outpost of the ancient Mediterranean world, something closer to Greece and Rome than to the kingdoms of Kush or Mali. By doing so, they could claim the glories of Egypt as part of Western civilization, while sidestepping the uncomfortable truth that much of its genius was born from Black Africa. One of the most striking examples lies in museum storage rooms, vast, climate-controlled vaults holding mummies that will never see the public eye. Some institutions have performed genetic testing on these remains but have declined to publish the results. In other cases, only partial data is released, carefully worded to avoid explicit confirmation of African origins. It is not simply an academic debate, it is a battle over cultural memory. And here lies the first revelation. The DNA of these three pharaohs confirms what ancient art, oral histories, and archaeology have been saying for decades: that the rulers of Egypt, especially in certain dynasties, were black Africans. The second revelation is even more troubling. Much of this evidence remains locked away, unpublished, or framed in language designed to cast doubt on its own conclusions. Why hide it? Some scholars point to methodological caution, the idea that ancient DNA studies are prone to contamination and misinterpretation. But others quietly admit that acknowledging the African identity of Egypt's rulers disrupts centuries of Eurocentric historical narratives, and that disruption threatens not just academic egos, but entire industries built on those narratives. Consider this: if the public fully embraced Egypt as a black African civilization, it would force a re-evaluation of history curricula, museum narratives, and even the way we define the roots of Western culture. It would also mean confronting the colonial theft of African heritage, as countless artifacts and the bodies of kings themselves would face calls for repatriation. The third revelation may be the most haunting of all. These three pharaohs are not alone. Across Egypt and Sudan, in museum basements and locked archives, there are hundreds of mummified remains yet to be tested, or whose results are quietly filed away. What might those silent witnesses reveal if given a voice? Could they map the migrations of entire peoples, link Egypt's earliest rulers to the great kingdoms of Inner Africa, or even rewrite the timelines of human history itself? The truth, it seems, is both in plain sight and deliberately obscured. The carved faces of Nubian pharaohs stare from museum displays. The DNA evidence, when released, matches what those faces already tell us. And yet an invisible hand guides the narrative, making sure the connections remain faint, the language vague, the truth deniable. As the desert wind sweeps through the Valley of the Kings, as tourists file past sarcophagi under the watchful eyes of security guards, one can't help but wonder, how many more truths lie waiting in the dark? How many more pharaohs, entombed for millennia, could speak through their DNA, if only we listened? Perhaps the real mystery is not what the science reveals, but why the world is still afraid to hear it. This is history off the map, where the past refuses to stay buried. If you believe these stories deserve to be told, if you want to uncover the truths hidden in the shadows of empires, like this video, share it, and subscribe. Because the sands of time may try to cover the past, but together we can brush them away.